Hi everyone, I'm Kana and I just finished the first week of Code Platoon's software bootcamp. Only 14 more weeks to go. I know I originally said it was 14 weeks, but because of the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, the 14 weeks is split over the 15 weeks. So today I thought I'd talk to you a little bit about what I learned during my first week, the things that I liked about being in a boot camp, and the things I liked about being in Code Platoon in particular, and then discuss some of the questions I had before boot camp and give you the answers now that I'm in it. So before the course started, I was trying to pre-learn a few things like Git and GitHub and the VS Code, Visual Studio Code, and I was doing this by watching a lot of YouTube videos and Googling, and I wasn't making a lot of progress. Like I understood what Git was and how it's different than GitHub. People are really good about explaining that, but I couldn't actually practice pulling down a repository, making changes to it and pushing it back up. There were too many steps and too many things that I didn't know. So I learned much more quickly having the structures already set up for me and a guide to help me figure out what I'm doing. And when I did run into problems, students to ask for help and the instructors and TAs to ask questions to. The bootcamp also introduced me to Slack and the best practices for Slack. So I've never really used Slack before. It is a learning curve. Not that it's difficult, but just knowing things like when you push enter, it actually submits what you're commenting on instead of going to the next line. So as you can probably tell, most of what I learned this week deals more with the logistical side of software engineering, how to do things, like how to pull a code down, how to write a code, how to run a code in VS Code, and how to communicate with other people. I did pick up some new programming skills, but most of it was about how to be a developer, like the developer side of it, not the programming side of it. Something I actually did find very useful though was after I solved a problem, I could go and look at what my fellow students did to solve the same problem. And I thought that when they said you'd have, if you have 15 different developers, you'll have 15 different codes. I thought that meant like 15 different variable names and 15 different modules used. But I discovered it means 15 different approaches to the problem. I will definitely be looking at the other students' answers to the same problems in the future. I can learn so much from just seeing how other people approach a problem differently than me, and maybe their approach would work better to solve other problems. About Code Platoon in particular, I am very pleasantly surprised by how much I like the program. My cohort has 31 students, 2 instructors, a lot of TAs, I'm not quite sure how many, maybe 5 or 6, and a very involved executive director, Rod, of Code Platoon. And they are actively trying to keep improving. So on Friday, we had something called Retro, where we talked about what went well that week, or this past week, and what didn't go so well. And we came up with action items that could be done to improve the future week ones for people. When you have 40 people trying to brainstorm ideas to make things better, action items that actually come out of it, and people that follow through on the action items, you have a good result. So now I understand why, like one of my other classmates mentioned that he couldn't find a bad review about Code Platoon, and that made him worried. And I sort of agreed. When I was looking, I was specifically searching for some bad reviews to see what the negative sides of Code Platoon would be, and I couldn't find any. And I thought that was a little fishy, but now I understand why. Like, you feel very supported, and it's a good program. If you do have an issue that you would like them to change, they're very receptive to it and will try to find a way to solve the problem or make it better. My favorite thing about Code Platoon so far is my favorite thing about the military, which is the people. The camaraderie is great. It feels like being back in the military, but without all the red tape. So if you are a vet or a military spouse, I would highly encourage you to look into Code Platoon for a software bootcamp. Now, things that I would watch out for, or tips for making your experience better, is to know going into day one that day one is going to be frustrating. It's going to be long, frustrating, and hard. And the reason for this is because Install Fest, where you load your machine up with all the software you're going to need for the program, has a lot of complications. Someone in my cohort mentioned that after day one, he was questioning his life choices. I definitely agree. I was questioning whether I should have ever joined Bootcamp. Why didn't I just stay with what I was doing instead of trying to do something new? But after the next 4 days, I definitely am glad I stuck with it, because the first day is frustrating, but it gets better. And the reason the first day is frustrating, which is likely that you're trying to troubleshoot things that you don't understand yet, is slowly, hopefully, going to go away. I had several questions before I started Bootcamp, and I wanted to address them here just in case you had similar questions to me. So the first question I had was, what was the day going to be like? So Code Platoon in particular, we start at 8:30 Chicago time. Now I'm in Norway, so it starts at 3:30 p.m. for me, and you can just convert the time to wherever you are. We take lunch around noon Chicago time, so 12 to 1, and there are several 10-minute breaks during the day, so about once an hour we get a 10-minute break. Most days we finish around 5:30, and occasionally we will have guest speakers that come after that, so it won't be done until 6:30. So how our day generally runs, we come in at 8:30, we fill out a form about how we feel about what we learned the previous day, then we do a lecture and ask questions, have lunch, maybe finish up the lecture, and then we spend the rest of the day coding. On Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, we code by ourselves, and on Tuesday and Thursday, we code with a partner using pair programming. I also wanted to know whether I'd be able to use 2 different computers during the course. One, because I have my classroom set up in the basement on a big computer, but I wanted to be able to take my laptop around the different places in the house, or if I wanted to go to a coffee shop during the day to actually do more coding or to do my homework, whether I'd be able to do that. And the answer is yes. Now you have to set up both machines, so it does make Install Fest a little bit longer because you have to do the same thing on both machines and troubleshoot both machines. But after that's done, it's definitely possible. Most of the things we do, we will bring down from GitHub and send back up to GitHub. So it's stored in a cloud, and you can access that cloud from anywhere that has internet. And in case you're wondering, you could even take it somewhere there's no internet. You just have to pull down whatever project you're working on to your local computer first, go work on it, and then whenever you get back to internet, you can push it back up. Probably my biggest concern was being remote. I didn't know how trying to learn remotely would affect my ability to learn quickly. I've done remote classes before. I used edX to take an Intro to Python class, and that was the only computer science experience I've really had before I started this boot camp. And it was a good experience, but things seemed to take a lot longer. I felt like I couldn't really ask questions. Like if I really got stuck on something, I could post it, but it would be a while before I got a response. But in this case, I don't feel that time lag as much. If there's a question, I just post it on our Slack channel, or if the class is going on, or a few hours after class when the TAs are there, you can just ask them to pop into a video call with you, and they can even see what you're working on if you screen share. So it's almost like being in person. I would say the biggest difference, never having been in person, is probably that you can't just turn right around to your classmate and say, hey, what did you just type in there? Because at least for me, there's a higher threshold to the questions I will ask being remote than I think if I was in person. Just because it takes just as long to type a good question into the Slack channel as it does to just Google it. So that might actually be good practice for my developer career. And since I do want a remote job, I guess I'll be dealing with this anyways. The only other big thing seems to be I found out they have cold brew. And I love cold brew coffee. I hope this was helpful in giving you an idea of what a coding bootcamp can be like, and specifically Code Platoon's bootcamp. If you have any specific questions you want to ask, you can just comment down below and I'll try to get to it, but if I don't get to it right away, I'll get to it after the bootcamp is over. Thanks for listening.